Hi students, this is Miss Wendt, and this is video number 3 of the biochemistry notes. And this video is all about lipids. And you see some examples here on this first page. Lipids include beeswax and other types of waxes, like you have earwax in your ears, or the waxy coating that plants have on some leaves. In our kitchen, it includes butter, margarine, different types of oils, olive oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil, corn oil, all of that stuff. So all of these would fall into the group called lipids. Okay, so remember, for these notes, you may have a fill-in-the-blank worksheet where you're filling in the blanks as we go through, or you may be writing them down on notebook paper. All right, so lipids includes fats, oils, and waxes, and what makes them different is they're a class or a group of macromolecules that do not dissolve in water. Okay, so the chemistry term for that, we call it a nonpolar molecule. So it doesn't have like a north and south pole that has like an attraction. It's just neutral all over the place. Okay, and you've probably seen this before in parking lots and stuff, where if there's, after a rainstorm and there's oil or gasoline kind of floating on top of the rainwater, okay, so it doesn't mix in with the water. They float in separate layers. That's a way to tell a lipid. All right, so lipids in your body and in the bodies of other living objects generally have one of 3 jobs. Okay, lipids can be energy storage, and this is long-term energy storage. Okay, so remember we talked about how carbohydrates are kind of fast energy you use that day. Lipids might be long-term, okay, such as in the fall, lots of animals will gain weight for long-term energy storage to get them through the winter, like when bears are hibernating or other animals are kind of bunkered down because of all the snow and they don't go anywhere. They'll get really fat in the fall to store energy for the winter. Another really important thing lipids do, lipids are the main chemical used to build cell membranes. And those are special lipids called phospholipids. So they have some phosphorus atoms in there with them. But every cell of your body has a cell membrane, and you are made of cells. So this is a pretty important thing for living things. So you have to have some lipids in your system or your body cannot make new cells. The third thing they do, lipids serve as reactants. And reactants are a chemistry term. This is the chemicals you start with at the beginning of a chemical reaction, and then they turn into products at the end, which is something new. So a lot of chemical reactions in your body start with lipids to make different substances that you need. Okay. In addition, lipids will, like the oils and waxes on your skin, help keep your skin moist so it doesn't dry out and crack. It keeps your hair shiny and soft. For plants, lipids on the outside of the leaves help protect them and keep water inside. So lipids are a pretty important part of your body. Okay. Now, here is an example of what's called a fatty acid. And lipids are generally built with several fatty acids. And you can see there's a big long chain, a straight line of carbons. And each carbon has 4 connections, or 4 bonds. And most of them are connected to a hydrogen. So on one end we have what's called the carboxyl group, which is, you don't have to memorize that. But it's kind of like just a connecting point, so it can connect to other things. But otherwise, it's a whole bunch of carbons with a full pile of hydrogens all around it. So that's called a hydrocarbon. And these guys store a lot of energy, and we can burn them for fossil fuels and get a lot of energy out of them. So coal, oil, natural gas, they look a lot like this too. All right, so this is a fatty acid. And a fatty acid is the building block or the little monomer piece that make up lipids. So this is the small little single piece, and we can put a whole bunch of them together to make bigger molecules in your body. Okay, Fatty acids can be either saturated or unsaturated. And you've maybe heard those words in commercials or on a food packaging thing or in health class. Okay, so here's what that actually means. The classification, so either saturated or unsaturated, depends on the proportion of hydrogen atoms to carbon. So what does that mean? That sounds kind of complicated. All right, let's check it out. We need a picture. So here is a fatty acid, and this one is saturated. Okay, for every carbon atom there is in this chain, there is a hydrogen in every possible place. Okay, carbons can all have 4 connections, and every connection possible has a hydrogen or a carbon on it. All right, that's what saturated means. If the ground outside is saturated after a rainstorm, that means no more water will fit on the ground. Saturated farmland means the water won't soak in. It just makes a pile at the top, and we might get flooding because that water has to go somewhere else. Okay, that's what saturated means. This chain is saturated with H's. No more H's will fit. It's completely full. Okay, so this is a saturated fat. This is a second saturated fat here, exactly the same. But the one on the bottom has something that looks a little different. And you notice the shape bends a little bit right here. And there's no hydrogens in this space here. The space is open. Okay, so where these connections are, instead of being connected to each other, these C's could have each had one more H, but the H's got removed, and so they had to connect to each other to make sure there was 4 connections for every carbon atom. Okay, this is an unsaturated molecule. We could add more H's here. It is not full of H's, not full of hydrogen, so it's unsaturated. Okay, so that's really the only difference. Saturateds are full of H's, unsaturated is not. And when it's not, you're always going to see a double bond here between 2 carbon atoms. And that makes a place where it's a little wiggly or a little bendy. And that actually makes it more healthy for your body, and I'll show that to you in a second. All right. Now this shape, if you look at this overall shape here, this whole thing, you know, there's 3 lines, and they're all connected here on the side to this blue piece. This blue piece is something called a glycerin. And glycerin is actually used in a lot of like moisturizers and lotions and stuff. But a glycerin holds these fatty acids together. Okay, so we have 3 fatty acids and 1 glycerin. And it kind of looks like the shape of a capital letter E. Okay, and so this guy here is a pretty common lipid. You're going to see this shape again later on. It's also on the last page of your worksheet, building macromolecules. Okay, so we'll come back to the shape in a little bit. I just want to point that out. All right, so here's the words that go with that picture, guys. Saturated fatty acids have the maximum number of bonds possible. Okay, they are full. No more hydrogens can be bonded to anything. They are totally full. Because of that, these guys are normally solid at room temperature. Okay, all those extra H's, the hydrogens, make it very solid. There's no wiggly, floppy, movable parts. So fats that you think of that are solid, like butter or bacon fat or chicken fat or a big piece of fat on a steak, all those kinds of animal fats that are solid at room temperature are saturated fats. Now, if you heat them up, they will melt into a liquid. That's true. But generally, if it's solid at room temperature, it is saturated fats. And they generally come from animals, like meat. Okay. Now, unsaturated fats, on the other hand, had what we call the double bond. It looks like an equal sign. And they are not full of hydrogens. These guys are usually liquid at room temperature. That double bond gives us a place where we're a little bit floppy and wiggly. And that lets us be more of a liquid shape. And these are usually going to be oils. So sunflower oil, olive oil, soybean oil, corn oil, all of those guys are liquid at room temperature. Okay, now for some reason, my slide, this other sentence is way off to the side. So I'm just going to drag this over, and I know some stuff will overlap, but that's okay. All right, now saturated animal fats, our butter, our bacon, they are associated with circulatory disorders. So circulatory is how your heart pushes blood through your body. And there's all kinds of little tubes. Like if you look at your wrist, you can see the little tubes, the veins and arteries that the blood goes through. Well, if we put solid butter or solid bacon fat in those tubes, pretty soon the tubes get clogged up and the butter can't go through very well. And that could lead to having a heart attack or a stroke or other types of problems with your body getting blood. Anytime you can substitute an oil for one of these guys, it's a little more healthy for your body because the oils are more flexible and they can just push through your veins and arteries more easily. So a lot of doctors will say, try to use olive oil, not butter for cooking, just because it's easier to flow through your body. Of course, a little bit of anything is probably okay, and too much of anything is a bad idea. So here's a quick little picture here, kind of compare the health benefits in these guys. So just what we talked about, we have some examples of both. Saturated is solid, they both start with the letter S, so that's easy to remember. Unsaturated are liquids, and these tend to be better for you. They actually increase your good cholesterol, and they actually grab some of the bad fats and pull it out of your body. Whereas the saturated fats make your bad cholesterol go up, and they clog up your arteries and get stuck. Okay, so if you could use oils instead of butter and bacon fat to cook, generally that's going to be healthier for your heart. All right, so here's a couple more examples real quick of some fatty acids. And I just wanted to show you that they're all very similar, but like you can see this guy down here has 2 double bonds. This guy only has 1. And they have different names, and some of the names refer to how many carbons are connected together. There might be hundreds of them. Okay, and if you're interested in memorizing them all, go right ahead. I never did. No teacher ever made me. But if you work like in an ice cream factory, you know, if you're trying to make a new ice cream that tastes really rich and creamy but being low fat, they work with these guys. They do taste testing with all these different types of fatty acids to see which ones taste really good and fattening but actually don't have very much fat. Okay, a lot of food scientists look at all these different kind of guys here. All right, so the top one here says it's a saturated fat, and you see all of the C's. There's no double bonds there. Everything's got connections. This middle one has 1 double bond, and we learned in our notes yesterday that mono means 1. So 1 double bond, 1 unsaturated fat. So there's 1 place where it's unsaturated. Down here, there's several places, so that's a polyunsaturated fat. Okay, and maybe if you start paying attention to food labels, you'll start seeing more of these types of things printed on your food label. And that's all it is. It sounds like really complicated chemistry, but it's just how many bonds are there. No big deal. All right, last thing. On your worksheet, you've got this. Okay, so here's the 3 fatty acids and a glycerol that I showed you before. So here it is kind of facing one way, and here it is facing sideways. Now, because there was 3 fatty acids, they all have to attach to the glycerol, and those are all going to be places where you're going to have to remove water do dehydration synthesis to get them to hook together. Okay, so to build this guy, you would have to take 3 waters away, 1 for each fatty acid you want to attach. Now, there's 3 fatty acids in this molecule. This guy is called a triglyceride, because tri means 3, like a triangle. Okay, and these lipids are pretty common. You probably have some floating around in your blood right now. And actually, this is one test that nurses do on people quite a bit. Nurses will, or like medical labs, if you're going through a whole bunch of tests, maybe not as a teenager, but once you get older in your 40s, they'll check your cholesterol and check your hormone levels and a bunch of stuff. And one of the things they'll do is called a lipid panel, where they'll see how many of different kinds of lipids are floating around in your blood to see if there's too many bad ones where you could get it all clogged up and have a heart attack, or if you have lots of good ones where everything is getting cleaned out regularly. And a triglyceride is one of those types that they're looking at in one of those lipid panels. So if you're going to go into any kind of nursing, you're going to see these guys come back again. But I really wanted to show you this image because on the back of your worksheet, it's going to show you this picture and ask you how many monomers are there. And there's actually 4. There's 3 fatty acids, and there's also a glycerol. So that's 4 little pieces to build this thing. And you have to take away 3 waters to connect all the pieces together the way it's built. All right, so I just wanted to show you that so you kind of remember that for your worksheet. So this is the end of part 3 of your notes. So your job now, go grab that worksheet, Building Macromolecules. The last page is all about lipids. Take a peek at that, get all the questions on all the pages done, and please hand it in. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.